Alright, so I don't even know where to start with this mess. I guess from the beginning. My name's Bobby, and this is about my wife, Tracy, and my childhood best friend, Gary. Tracy and Gary were high school sweethearts. They were that couple, homecoming king and queen. Everyone thought they'd be together forever. But life happened, and they broke up after graduation. Nothing dramatic, just young love that fizzled out. We were all friends, and over time, Tracy and I got close. Eventually, we started dating. Gary didn't seem to care. He had moved on, or at least, that's what I thought. Years later, I married Tracy, and Gary was even my best man at our wedding. Fast forward a couple of decades, and Gary got sick. Really sick. Terminal cancer. It was the kind of news that makes you reevaluate everything, and Tracy took it hard. She insisted that we take care of him, that we couldn't let him go through this alone. And honestly, I agreed. He was my best friend. Of course, I'd help. But looking back, I should have seen the signs. Tracy started spending more and more time with Gary. At first, it made sense. He needed help. But then, she started staying at his place overnight. She'd come home late, exhausted, saying she was just too tired to drive back sooner. She'd brush off my questions with, "Bobby, he's dying. Can you not make this about you?" It was little things too. The way she started dressing up before going to see him. The way she always had her phone on silent. The way her face lit up when he texted. I felt like I was going crazy, but I kept telling myself, "He's sick, don't be selfish." I should have trusted my gut. Then, Tracy got pregnant. I didn't question it at first. We had a daughter, Kaylee, already, and we talked about maybe having another. But something about this didn't sit right with me. The timing. The way Tracy acted when she told me, almost nervous rather than excited. And the way Gary suddenly seemed extra emotional around her. I didn't want to believe what my gut was screaming at me. And then one night, I overheard a conversation between Tracy and Kaylee. My own daughter. "It's okay, Mom. I won't tell Dad. He doesn't need to know." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. But the worst was still coming. After overhearing that conversation between Tracy and Kaylee, my whole body went cold. I wanted to believe I misheard, that maybe they were talking about something innocent. But deep down I knew. Something was wrong. I didn't say anything right away. I told myself I needed proof. If I came at Tracy without it, she'd just spin some excuse, turn it around on me, make me feel like I was the bad guy. So I played dumb and started paying closer attention. Tracy was acting too perfect. She suddenly became extra affectionate with me, always wanting to cuddle, always talking about how excited she was for our baby. She started cooking my favorite meals, doing little things for me she hadn't done in years. It was like she was trying too hard. And Kaylee? She wouldn't even look me in the eye. The guilt was everywhere. I needed answers, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through Tracy's phone. She was in the shower. Her phone was on the nightstand. No passcode. Almost like she wanted me to find it. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her texts. And then there it was, her messages with Gary. "Tracy, he's starting to ask questions. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Gary, just a little longer. He doesn't need to know. We did what we did out of love. He'll understand one day. Tracy, I just hope he never asks for a DNA test." My stomach dropped. I don't remember much after that. I just remember sitting there, staring at the screen, feeling like my whole world had been set on fire. She knew. She knew the baby was Gary's. She had been lying to my face for months. And worse? She was willing to let me raise another man's child, just because she thought it was the compassionate thing to do for a dying man. I was done playing dumb. That night, I walked into the bedroom, tossed her phone on the bed, and said, "So how long were you planning on lying to me?" Her face went pale. She knew. And she knew she was caught. Tracy just froze when I said it. I saw the exact moment she realized there was no way out of this. No more sweet talking. No more guilt tripping. No more excuses. She swallowed hard and tried to play dumb. "What are you talking about, Bobby?" I picked up her phone, scrolled back to the messages, and read them out loud. Every single word. Slowly. Deliberately. By the time I was done, she was shaking. "Bobby, please, it's not what you think. I laughed. I actually laughed because the audacity of that sentence was insane. Not what I think. So you didn't sleep with Gary? You didn't get pregnant by him? You didn't plan to let me raise his kid like some clueless idiot? She started crying. Full-on, dramatic sobs. Hands covering her face. But I wasn't falling for it. I'd seen her cry before. This wasn't guilt. This was fear. She wasn't sad about what she did. She was terrified of the consequences. And then, out of nowhere, Kaylee burst into the room. Dad, stop. I turned to her, completely caught off guard. She was crying too. And then she looked at her mom and said, "Just tell him." That's when I knew. Kaylee had been in on it this whole time. I looked between the two of them, barely able to breathe. How long have you known, Kaylee? She sniffled. Since before Mom even told you she was pregnant. I thought my heart couldn't break any more than it already had. But hearing that? Knowing my own daughter had helped her mother lie to me? That wrecked me. Tracy finally started talking, voice trembling. I didn't do it to hurt you, Bobby. I swear. Gary was dying. He was alone. We got caught up in the past. And then when I found out I was pregnant, I thought, she choked on her words. I thought it would be easier if you believed the baby was yours. I stared at her. Easier? For who? She sobbed harder. For everyone. For me, for you, for the baby. For Gary. He didn't have long, and I didn't want him to die feeling like he had nothing left in this world. I felt sick. So what was I? Just some idiot you could use? Some guy who'd pay for and raise another man's kid just so Gary could die happy. She didn't answer. Because she knew that's exactly what she had planned. I turned to Kaylee again. My own daughter. And you? You were okay with this? She wiped her tears. I didn't want to see Mom hurt. And Gary was good to me. It's not like it was some random guy. He was family. He loved Mom. And he loved me too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And what about me, Kaylee? Did it ever cross your mind how much this would hurt me? Silence. That was my answer. I turned back to Tracy, feeling nothing but disgust. I want a DNA test. And if that baby isn't mine, I'm done. She tried to argue, but I was already walking out the door. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't even be in the same room without wanting to scream. I had my answer. I just needed the proof. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire life had been one big joke at my expense. Tracy stayed in our bedroom. I could hear her crying through the walls. I didn't care. The next morning, I went straight to a clinic and scheduled a paternity test. Tracy didn't even argue, she just nodded like a kid caught stealing. I think she still had some hope that maybe, just maybe, she could lie her way out of this. Kaylee wouldn't even look at me. Good. A week later, I got the results. 0% probability of paternity. I stared at the paper in my hands, numb. I had already known. Deep down, I had known. But seeing it in black and white made it real in a way that crushed whatever was left of my heart. This baby was not mine. I walked into the house, tossed the envelope onto the kitchen counter, and waited. Tracy picked it up with shaking hands, read it, and covered her mouth like she was shocked. Like she hadn't spent months lying to my face. Like this was some unexpected twist in a story she had written. "Bobby, please," she whispered. I want a divorce. She staggered back like I had slapped her. "Wait, we can talk about this. Please. The baby's innocent in all this. And I still love you." I laughed bitterly. Love? You don't even know what love is, Tracy. You loved Gary, not me. I was just a convenience to you. Her face crumpled. That's not true. It is. You let me rub your feet when you were pregnant with our baby. You let me talk about baby names. Let me plan a whole future around a lie. You let me believe this was my child while Kaylee, our daughter, helped you keep the secret. So don't stand there and tell me this was about love. She burst into tears, dropping onto the chair like she had no strength left. I was scared. I clenched my jaw. No, you were selfish. For the first time, she didn't argue. Kaylee walked in at that moment, saw her mother crying, and shot me a glare like I was the bad guy. "Dad, please. Stop." I turned to her, exhausted. You knew. You knew, and you still let me believe I was this kid's father. How do you expect me to just pretend that doesn't change everything? Tears streamed down her face. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, Kaylee. You did. She ran upstairs, sobbing. Tracy just sat there, defeated. What happens now? She whispered. I exhaled, forcing the rage in my chest to settle. Now? You have your baby. But you raise it alone. I'm done. And with that, I walked out. I had nothing left to say. I moved out that same night. Didn't pack much, just a duffel bag with clothes, my keys, and whatever dignity I had left. Tracy just sat there, sobbing, begging me to please talk, but I had nothing left to say. She had a week to figure out her next steps because I was filing for divorce. I could barely even look at her. Kaylee stood by the stairs, watching me, her eyes red and swollen. I thought she'd say something, try to explain herself, maybe even apologize, but she didn't. And honestly, I don't think I would have listened. I stayed with my buddy Jake for a while, just trying to wrap my head around everything. But Tracy? She wouldn't let me breathe. The texts started first. Bobby, please, we can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can still be a family. I love you. I don't want to lose you. The nerve of this woman. She wasn't sorry she cheated, wasn't sorry for lying, wasn't even sorry for trying to trap me into raising Gary's kid. She was just sorry she got caught. I ignored them all. Then came the calls. At first, I declined them, but when she started leaving voicemails, long tear-soaked monologues about how she never meant for this to happen, I just blocked her. But of course, she didn't stop there. A few days later, I was out grabbing dinner with Jake when my phone started blowing up again, this time from her family. Her mom was the first. Bobby, she's sorry. She made a mistake, but she loves you. Then her sister chimed in. Come on, man. Gary's dead. Can't you just forgive and move on? That one almost made me laugh. Forgive and move on? Like my wife having a full-blown affair and lying about her pregnancy was the same as forgetting to take the trash out? Like I was the bad guy for not wanting to raise another man's child? I didn't respond. Then came the one text I wasn't ready for. Kaylee. Dad, please talk to me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just stared at the screen, feeling like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. My own daughter. The little girl I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for. The same daughter who had looked me in the eye for months and lied. I wanted to believe she had been manipulated, that Tracy had guilted her into keeping quiet. But the truth was, Kaylee had made her choice. She picked her mother. She picked the lie. And she had expected me to just accept it. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I blocked Tracy's number, put my phone on silent, and sat back down. Jake didn't ask me what happened, and I was grateful for that. I just picked up my drink and stared at the table, letting the weight of everything settle in. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I filed for divorce the next morning. No long, dramatic conversation, no second chances. Just walked into my lawyer's office and got the paperwork started. Tracy called me about 10 times that day, probably figuring out what was happening, but I didn't pick up. She wanted to talk? She had months to tell me the truth. She could talk to my lawyer now. It didn't take long for word to spread. Tracy must have gone into full panic mode because suddenly, people I hadn't heard from in years were crawling out of the woodwork, telling me I was being too harsh. Her mother called me again, saying Tracy was beside herself, and that she had just made one bad decision. Like she tripped and fell onto Gary by accident. Then came her friends, most of whom never had much to say to me before, suddenly acting like my emotional well-being was their business. She was just trying to be there for a dying man, Bobby. She didn't want to hurt you. She thought she was doing the right thing. That one really got me. The right thing? The right thing would have been not cheating. The right thing would have been telling me the truth instead of planning to have me raise another man's child. The right thing would have been not dragging Kaylee into her mess and turning her against me. I stopped responding after the first few messages. It didn't matter what anyone said, Tracy had chosen to betray me, and there was no coming back from that. But as much as I tried to block it all out, I couldn't stop thinking about Kaylee. I wanted to talk to her. I wanted to believe that she was just manipulated, that maybe there was still a chance to fix our relationship. But every time I thought about it, I remembered that night. The way she looked at me when I confronted Tracy. The way she cried, but never apologized. Then, 2 weeks later, Tracy showed up at Jake's place. I came home from work exhausted, only to find her sitting on the porch, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She jumped up when she saw me. "Bobby, please. Just talk to me." I should have walked right past her, but something about the way she looked stopped me. She didn't look angry or manipulative this time. She just looked desperate. So, like an idiot, I sighed and sat down on the steps. "You've got 5 minutes." She took a shaky breath. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But Bobby, we've been together for 20 years. We have a family. You can't just throw all of that away." I clenched my jaw. "I didn't throw anything away. You did." She wiped at her eyes. "It was a mistake." I shook my head. "No, Tracy. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is saying something you don't mean in an argument. A mistake is not sleeping with my best friend, getting pregnant, and lying to me for months." She flinched but kept going. "I was scared, okay? I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't want to tell me." I turned to look at her. "Be honest. If I never found out, would you have ever told me?" She hesitated. That was all I needed to see. I stood up. "I hope this was worth it, Tracy." She grabbed my arm. "Bobby, please. I love you. I need you." I yanked my arm free. "You needed me to clean up your mess. And I'm done." She started sobbing, but I didn't wait around to listen. I walked inside, locked the door, and let her cry outside until she finally left. I thought that would be the last time I ever saw her. But Tracy wasn't done yet. A week passed, and I started to think Tracy had finally accepted reality. The texts had slowed down, and for the first time since everything blew up, I felt like I could breathe. But then one night, Jake and I were sitting on the couch watching TV when there was a knock at the door. "Man, if that's Tracy again, I swear," Jake muttered, getting up before I could stop him. The second he opened the door, I knew. It wasn't just Tracy standing there. Kaylee was with her. I felt like someone punched me in the gut. She looked different. Smaller. Like she'd lost weight. Like she'd been crying. And despite everything, despite the betrayal, she was still my daughter, and seeing her like that hurt. She stared at me, gripping her sleeves like a little kid. "Dad." Jake stepped aside, glancing at me. "You want me to kick them out?" I sighed. "No. I got it." He hesitated before nodding and walking to the back of the house. I stepped outside, keeping my arms crossed. "What do you want, Tracy?" She didn't answer at first. She just nudged Kaylee forward. "She wants to talk to you." Kaylee's lip trembled. "I'm sorry, Dad." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "Sorry for what?" She flinched at my tone. "For not telling you. For hurting you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to scoop her up in a hug and pretend none of this had ever happened. But I couldn't. "Why did you do it, Kaylee?" My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Why did you lie to me?" She looked at the ground. "Mom said it was the right thing to do. She said you'd understand one day." I laughed bitterly. "Oh yeah? And do you understand now?" She nodded quickly, sniffling. "I do. I should have told you the truth. I should have stood up to her. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the betrayal still sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake." "And now you're here because you feel bad? Or because your mom dragged you?" Kaylee hesitated for a split second, just long enough to confirm what I already knew. Tracy had put her up to this. I turned to Tracy. "You really don't stop, do you?" Tracy bristled. "She wanted to come, Bobby. Did she? Or did you tell her that if she cried enough, I'd forgive you?" Tracy's face hardened. "You act like I don't regret this. Like I don't cry myself to sleep every night." I scoffed. "Good. You should." Her jaw clenched, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Bobby, I know you're angry, but we still have a family. Kaylee still needs her father." I shook my head. "Don't use her to get to me. If Kaylee wants a relationship with me, that's between us. Not you." Kaylee wiped her eyes. "I do, Dad. I miss you." Something cracked inside me then. I missed her too. But I couldn't just let this go. I need time, Kaylee. I don't know if I can just act like everything's fine. She nodded, looking heartbroken, but I had to be honest. Tracy sighed, like she was expecting more. So that's it? You're just done with us? With you? Yeah. I turned back to Kaylee. But I'm not closing the door on you. We'll figure this out. Without your mother. Tracy flinched, like that hurt more than anything else I'd said. I didn't care. Without another word, I walked back inside and shut the door. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I was finally taking my life back. The days after that conversation with Kaylee were quiet. Too quiet. No texts from Tracy. No more family members trying to guilt me. Even Kaylee kept her distance. And honestly, I was okay with that. I needed time. Time to clear my head, to figure out what my life even was now. Then, out of nowhere, Jake came into the living room one evening, holding his phone. Dude, you're not gonna believe this. I barely looked up. What now? He hesitated, then handed me his phone. Tracy posted something. I took it, and the second I saw what was on the screen, my blood boiled. It was a long dramatic Facebook post, one of those I never thought I'd be in this position pity party rants. But the part that made me snap? The picture she posted with it. It was a sonogram. The caption? No matter what happens, this baby is a blessing. I could already see the comments rolling in. Her friends and family showering her with sympathy. You're so strong, Tracy. That baby is lucky to have you. Bobby will come around. He just needs time. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. Jake sat down next to me, watching my reaction. She's trying to control the narrative, man. Yeah, I muttered, tossing his phone back. I see that. I should have expected this. Tracy had always cared about appearances, about making sure people saw her in the best light. And now, since she couldn't guilt me into staying, she was doing the next best thing, making me look like the villain. Jake raised an eyebrow. You gonna say something? I thought about it. About blasting the truth in the comments, letting everyone know exactly what she did. But then I exhaled. No. Let her play her games. I don't care what strangers think. Jake nodded, but I could tell he wanted me to fight back. Maybe a part of me did too. But I wasn't going to waste my energy on Tracy anymore. She wasn't my problem. But as much as I tried to ignore it, that post had stirred something ugly in me. Because the truth was, I did care. Not about what her friends thought, but about the fact that Tracy still had control over my life in some way. She had shattered my trust, destroyed my marriage, and she still thought she could win. I wasn't about to let that happen. So the next day, I called my lawyer and made it clear, I wanted full separation. No ties. No lingering connections. No way for her to ever use me again. The house? She could have it. The cars? Didn't care. All I wanted was my freedom. And Kaylee. That was the one thing I wasn't backing down on. Because Tracy could try to rewrite the story all she wanted. But I wasn't going to let her take everything from me. The divorce process moved fast after that. I made it clear, I wasn't fighting for the house, the savings, or any of the material things. Tracy could have them. I just wanted to be done. But when it came to Kaylee, that's where I drew the line. Tracy must have thought I'd just disappear, that I'd cut ties with Kaylee the same way I did with her. But she was wrong. The moment I filed, I also made sure I had solid legal grounds to maintain my relationship with my daughter. I didn't want Tracy using her as some kind of bargaining chip. I expected her to fight me on it. I expected another round of sob stories and manipulation. But surprisingly, she didn't. Maybe she knew she had no leg to stand on. Maybe she thought Kaylee wouldn't want anything to do with me after everything. Either way, she didn't contest it. The only problem? Kaylee barely reached out. I waited. I gave her space, thinking maybe she needed time, maybe she was struggling with everything too. But days turned into weeks, and the silence stretched longer. It was like she didn't know how to be around me anymore. And I couldn't blame her. One night, after weeks of nothing, I finally sent her a message. Hey. Just checking in. I know things are weird right now, but I'm still here. Let me know when you want to talk. Hours passed. No response. Then finally, just before midnight, she texted back. I don't know what to say. I stared at those words for a long time. Finally, I replied. Say anything. I just want to hear from you. A few minutes later, 3 little dots appeared on the screen. Then disappeared. Then reappeared. Then nothing. She never answered. That's when it really hit me. Kaylee might have been my daughter, but she wasn't a kid anymore. She had made a choice. She had sided with her mother when it mattered most. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to face what that meant. I wasn't going to beg. I had spent too long being the one who cared more. So I left the ball in her court. If she wanted me in her life, she knew where to find me. But I wasn't going to keep chasing after someone who had already decided I wasn't worth the truth. And as much as it hurt, I had to accept that some things, some people, just couldn't be fixed. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly started to feel normal again. Or at least, as normal as it could after having my entire world flipped upside down. The divorce was finalized, Tracy got the house, and I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No ghosts of betrayal haunting every room. No forced smiles. No lies. Kaylee still kept her distance. I reached out a few more times, nothing too serious, just checking in, letting her know I was here. Sometimes she'd respond with a short "Hey, I'm good." Other times, nothing at all. It hurt like hell, but I wasn't going to force her. Maybe one day she'd realize that I was the parent who never lied to her. But until then, all I could do was move forward. And that's when I met Angel. It was nothing dramatic. No grand, movie-like moment. Just a normal Tuesday night at a coffee shop. I was sitting in the corner, scrolling through my phone, when she walked in. Long dark hair, tired eyes, like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. She ordered her coffee, turned around, and nearly tripped over someone's bag. I caught her arm before she hit the ground. "Whoa," I said, steadying her. "You okay?" She laughed, embarrassed. "Yeah. Just one of those days." I don't know what it was about her, but something just clicked. We ended up talking for an hour that night. Then another hour the next. Then before I knew it, we were seeing each other every week. Angel had been through her own hell. A bad marriage. A husband who broke her trust in a way eerily similar to what Tracy did to me. She understood the kind of pain I carried, because she carried it too. But the thing about Angel? She didn't let it make her bitter. She made me laugh again. Made me realize that maybe, just maybe, there was still something good waiting for me after all this. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And no matter what Tracy or Kaylee thought, I wasn't looking back. Angel was different. I didn't expect to meet someone like her, not so soon after everything. Hell, I wasn't even looking. After Tracy, I figured love was something other people got to have. Not me. I had my chance, and it blew up in my face. And if I'm being honest, for a while, I didn't think I'd ever trust another woman again. But then there was Angel, calm, steady, real. We started off as just friends. She had been through her own betrayal, her own heartbreak, and neither of us were looking to jump into anything serious. We'd meet up for coffee, talk about life, complain about work. It was easy with her. No pressure. No pretending. She never looked at me with pity, never acted like I was some broken man she needed to fix. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized I wasn't broken. I had just been surrounded by the wrong people. One night, after months of just hanging out, we went for a late-night drive. No destination, just the open road. She had the windows down, hair whipping in the wind, a soft smile on her face. We didn't even have the radio on, just the quiet hum of the car filling the silence. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "You're not as angry as you think you are." I glanced at her. What? She kept her eyes on the road, her fingers tapping against the steering wheel. "You tell yourself you're mad at Tracy, at Kaylee. But it's not anger. It's just hurt." I swallowed hard. Because she was right. I wasn't walking around pissed off all the time. I was just carrying this ache. This feeling of being tossed aside, of not being good enough for the people who were supposed to love me the most. Angel turned to look at me then, her expression soft. "You don't have to prove anything to them. You're allowed to be happy, Bobby." And for the first time in a long time, I actually believed that. We didn't rush into anything. We took our time. And the more I got to know Angel, the more I realized, this was what love was supposed to feel like. No games. No secrets. Just two people who had been through hell, finding comfort in each other. Meanwhile, Tracy's life wasn't turning out the way she expected. At first, she still tried to reach out. Little things, random texts about the divorce paperwork, questions about what she should do with some of my old stuff. But I never answered. Eventually, the messages stopped. Then one day, Jake sent me something that almost made me laugh. Tracy had posted again. Being a single mom is the hardest job in the world, but my baby is worth it. There it was. The full transformation into the martyr. Like she hadn't single-handedly destroyed her own family. Like she wasn't the reason her child was growing up without a father. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just indifferent. She got exactly what she wanted. She and Gary's baby. A fresh start. Only, from what I heard through the grapevine, it wasn't the happy ending she thought it would be. She never remarried. The life she envisioned, the one where I forgave her, where we worked through it, never happened. And Kaylee? She was still distant. Every now and then, she'd text me, but it never went beyond small talk. She never asked to meet up, never really tried to fix things. And eventually, I stopped reaching out too. Because the truth is, people show you where they stand. Kaylee made her choice. And I was making mine. Years passed, and my life with Angel flourished. We traveled, built something strong, real. We got married in a quiet ceremony with just a few close friends. No big wedding, no forced smiles, just two people who had already been through the worst, promising to be better to each other. And the best part? It lasted. Longer than my first marriage. Stronger. One day, out of the blue, Kaylee messaged me. It had been years since we had a real conversation. "Hey Dad. Can we meet up?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I had spent so much time waiting for this. Wondering if she'd ever come around. Wondering if she even cared. And now, here she was. But the thing is, I wasn't the same man she had left behind. I had moved on. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to look back. I sat there staring at my phone, Kaylee's message glowing on the screen like some kind of test from the universe. "Hey Dad. Can we meet up?" 14 words. That's all it was. For years, I had replayed everything in my head. The betrayal. The silence. The way she chose her mother's lies over the truth. And now, suddenly, she wanted to talk. Just like that. No apology. No explanation. Just a request. Angel walked into the room, fresh from the shower, towel wrapped around her hair. She took one look at me and sighed. "What's wrong?" I turned my phone toward her. She read the message, then set the phone down. "And what do you want to do?" That was the thing. I didn't know. For a long time, I had told myself that if Kaylee ever reached out, I'd jump at the chance. That I'd do whatever it took to mend our relationship. She was my daughter, after all. I had raised her. I had loved her. That didn't just go away. But now? After years of distance, of her choosing silence over trying to fix things? I wasn't sure I had it in me anymore. Angel squeezed my hand. "You don't have to rush this. Just sit with it. If you want to meet her, you can. And if you don't, that's okay too." I nodded, but the words kept circling in my head. A week passed before I responded. Not because I was trying to be petty or make her wait, but because I genuinely needed time to think. Finally, I texted back. "When and where?" She replied almost instantly, like she had been waiting by the phone. "Whenever you're free. Coffee." We settled on a small cafe on the edge of town. A neutral place. No memories attached to it. Just two people meeting after years of silence. I got there early, mostly because I didn't trust myself not to turn around and leave. The place was quiet, only a few people inside. I grabbed a table near the window and waited. 15 minutes later, the door opened. And there she was. Kaylee looked older. Not just in the way time naturally changes a person, but in a tired way. Like life had worn her down a little. She scanned the cafe, spotted me, and hesitated for just a second before walking over. "Hey Dad," she said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. I nodded. Hey. An awkward silence stretched between us. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her fingers the way she used to do when she was nervous as a kid. Thanks for meeting me. I sipped my coffee. You asked, so I came. She winced, like the words hurt. Maybe they did. Another pause. Then she let out a shaky breath. I know I messed up. I just watched her waiting. She swallowed hard. I should have told you the truth. Back then. When it mattered. I set my cup down, crossing my arms. So why didn't you? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. Because Mom made me believe it was the right thing to do. She told me you'd never understand. That you'd overreact. That you'd leave us. I let out a humorless laugh. And what do you call what she did? Keeping the secret was supposed to keep me around. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't know. I was young. I just thought, if I kept quiet, maybe everything would be okay. Was it? Her eyes dropped to the table. No. I leaned back. So what changed? Why now? She hesitated before answering. Mom and I don't talk much anymore. That caught me off guard. What? She gave a sad smile. She's not the same, Dad. She got worse after you left. At first, she played the victim, like you just abandoned her. But when she realized people weren't buying it, she turned bitter. She started blaming me for everything. For keeping the secret, for losing you, for not helping her fix things. She exhaled. She made me feel like it was all my fault. I stayed silent, letting that sink in. I had assumed Kaylee had spent these years happily by her mother's side, convinced I was the bad guy. I never imagined Tracy had turned on her too. Kaylee played with the napkin in front of her. It took me a long time to see it. To realize she's not the person I thought she was. She looked up at me, voice small. I miss you, Dad. A lump formed in my throat. I had spent so many years thinking I had lost her forever. And now, here she was, looking at me like the scared little girl who used to hold my hand when she was nervous. Part of me wanted to just forgive everything, to wrap my arms around her and tell her it was okay. But another part of me, the part that had spent years in pain, years feeling like I had been nothing more than an afterthought, was still hesitant. I don't know if we can ever go back to how it was, I admitted. I spent a long time thinking you didn't care. I do, she whispered. I always did. I was just too afraid to face it. Another pause. Then she cleared her throat. I don't expect everything to be normal overnight. I want to try. If you'll let me. I looked at her for a long moment, searching for any sign that this was just guilt, just another attempt at fixing the past without truly meaning it. But all I saw was sincerity. Finally, I nodded. All right. Her face lit up with relief. Okay. It was a small step. A cautious one. But it was a step. Kaylee and I didn't become close again overnight. It was a slow, careful process. Coffee meetups turned into phone calls. Phone calls turned into dinners. There were still gaps, still wounds that hadn't fully healed, but she was trying. And so was I. As for Tracy, she never changed. She never apologized. She never took responsibility. And the more Kaylee saw that, the more she distanced herself. I never wasted another second on my ex-wife. I had Angel. I had a real marriage this time. One built on trust, not lies. And I wasn't about to waste another moment on someone who had proven over and over that she didn't deserve me. Kaylee stood by my side when I married Angel. She met Angel's family, became part of something healthy for the first time in years. And slowly, piece by piece, I realized something. I had won. Not in the way Tracy thought winning worked. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making her suffer. I won because I healed. Because I built something better. Because at the end of the day, love based on lies will always fall apart. And real love? That lasts. Years passed, and the life I built with Angel became something I had once thought was impossible, peaceful, genuine, free of secrets, lies, or the constant weight of wondering if the person beside me was hiding something. With her, love wasn't some obligation. It wasn't something that had to be earned or proven over and over again. It was just there, strong and steady, growing every day. She made me laugh. She listened. She didn't keep me on edge, waiting for the next betrayal. She was safe. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until I had it. We built a life together, one that wasn't about fixing past wounds, but about starting fresh. We traveled. We worked on ourselves. We supported each other's goals without competition or resentment. It was the kind of love I thought only existed for other people, but it was real, and it was mine. Then one day, something happened that I never saw coming. Angel and I were at home, sitting on the back porch, watching the sun go down. She was sipping tea, legs tucked up under her, the glow of the sunset making her look even more beautiful than usual. She turned to me and smiled softly. "Do you ever think about having kids again?" I froze. For the longest time, I had told myself I was done with that chapter of my life. The idea of starting over, of raising a child after everything I had been through, felt impossible. For years, every time I even thought about fatherhood, all I could see was Kaylee, the little girl I had loved, the teenager who had lied, the woman who had eventually found her way back to me. But now, looking at Angel, the answer came surprisingly easy. "Yeah," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "I do." And just like that, a new chapter began. A year later, Angel and I welcomed our son into the world. Holding him for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Pure, unshaken hope. This time, there were no doubts, no betrayals waiting in the shadows. Just a tiny, innocent life in my arms, looking up at me like I was his entire world. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that I was worthy of that kind of love. Kaylee came to visit not long after. By then, our relationship had gotten better, not perfect, but steady. She had worked hard to show me that she was truly sorry, and little by little, I had let her back in. When she saw her little brother for the first time, she smiled in a way I hadn't seen since she was a kid. "He's perfect," she whispered, reaching out to touch his tiny fingers. I watched her carefully, wondering if she felt replaced. If seeing me with a new family, a new child, hurt in some way. But then she turned to me, eyes glassy with emotion, and said something that hit me harder than I expected. "You deserve this, Dad." And for the first time, I truly believed that I did. Tracy never remarried. She had her second child, the one she had tried to pass off as mine, and from what I heard, raising him alone was nothing like the noble story she had built in her head. At first, she kept up the act, playing the strong single mother card for sympathy. But people got tired of it. Her friends, the same ones who had defended her and told me to forgive and move on, slowly stopped reaching out. They saw the bitterness creeping in, the way she couldn't let go of the past. Kaylee told me once that her mom had tried dating again, but it never worked out. Every man she met eventually left. Because who wants to be with a woman who still can't admit she was wrong? She never apologized. Not once. Not after the divorce, not after years of raising another man's child alone, not even after she lost Kaylee's trust. She still believed, somehow, that she was the victim. And me? I didn't care anymore. The anger was gone. The resentment had faded. Not because I forgave her, I didn't. She had never asked for forgiveness, anyway. But because she just didn't matter anymore. She was a ghost from a past life, a reminder of a man I used to be. A man who had finally moved on. One day, years later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was Tracy. "I saw pictures of your wedding. You look happy. I just wanted to say, I guess I'm glad you found that." No apology. No accountability. Just the same vague, self-pitying nonsense. I stared at it for a long time before finally typing back. "I did. And I hope one day, you find your own happiness too." Then I blocked the number. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because there was nothing left to say. Tracy had spent years waiting for me to come back, convinced I would one day realize she was my true home. But the truth was, my real home was the life I built without her. A life with a wife who loved me the right way. A life with a son who would grow up knowing what trust actually looked like. A life with a daughter who finally saw the truth for what it was. A life where I won. Because winning wasn't about getting revenge. It wasn't about making Tracy suffer. Winning was leaving it all behind and never looking back.